Welcome to Unfamiliar Territory, an anime podcast hosted by two white dudes who've been friends for over 15 years. We talk about the history and influence of anime, as well as review anime new and old, believe in the stars, and sail away for the future into unfamiliar territory.
My name is Grant.
And I'm Brantley. Heads up, spoilers on the way. Check the description, see if you're safe to listen. Grant, can I say something controversial that most people...
Nope. Cutting it off right there.
This is something that most people, they don't feel ready to say this. But I think it needs to be heard. I want to speak for them, Grant. Is that okay?
Fine.
Okay. Thank you for giving your blessing. I do appreciate that.
Dumb bitch.
Scooby-Doo taught us that the real monsters are humans.
Oh, yes.
Think on that.
Uh-huh.
Think on that. Don't reverse search this on our shower thoughts. Don't do it.
I fucking hate you.
It's okay. You don't have to worry about that because we watched Undead Girl Murder Farce, which is kind of like that but different.
Yeah. For the reference of this review, we're gonna spend about 15 minutes talking about it without spoilers. So if you're curious to if you wanna listen to this and you wanna know if the show's good, then cool. We'll tell you when we'll start spoiling the show. But I think that this show is a sleeper hit of this season with some problems that I think are easily overlooked.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment. Both of us like this show, and in fact, when I was going back through it to take notes, it finally occurred to me how much I like this show. I definitely enjoyed every episode of it, and it goes by fast. At least it did for us in our watch group. But I think that going through episodes again to look for things and to write stuff down on it made me kind of appreciate on a more atomic level what was working. So yeah, there's I guess your upfront glowing review from me. On the whole, Grant, what would you say stuck out to you or makes this a sleeper hit, quote unquote?
I think the dialogue is really good, especially in the early episodes. I think the relationship between our main trio is very fun and dynamic. Mm-hmm. The show talks a lot, but it gives itself room to breathe in those moments, even while it's talking. I think that the characters are fun. I think they're cool. I think that they're interesting. It reminds me a little bit of, and I'm not the first person to make this comparison, it reminds me a lot of Spectre, where you sort of have these motley crew of people that get along in interesting ways, but they're still kind of shitheads to each other, solving paranormal mysteries.
Oh, by the way, we reviewed Spectre, so you go watch this video.
Yeah, you go watch us talk about Spectre. We like that one too. That being said, I do think that there are some problems with it. And the biggest problem, I think, going into this show, and I don't think this is necessarily a spoiler, but it doesn't have a proper ending. The book that it is based off is still ongoing, mm-hmm. with the fourth book being released in July of 2023. And that July 14th, 2023, and that book is the last arc of the anime. So, with that being said, you are going in and you are not solving the overarching mystery. And we probably won't get an overarching mystery solved unless the author picks up his pace. So the original author, Yugo Awasaki, is he won the Tetsuyo Ayukawa Award for his murder mystery stuff. An Undead Girl Murder Farce is his baby. It's the one he has written the most of. And He published the first one in 2015, the second one in 2016, and then he took a 5-year hiatus to publish the third one, and then 2 years later, the fourth one came out. So if we are looking for Undead Girl Murder Farce 5, probably not, at least at the earliest 2025. And that would be essentially
booking it
4 episodes,
literally.
yeah and it's not impossible, especially if this kind of gives him a reason to write more. But you're gonna go into the show and it's not going to have an ending. I also find the last arc a little rushed in a couple different departments, but we'll talk about that when we get into spoiler territories. But if you are looking for a show that is unique, has some pretty decent action, but it doesn't take itself too seriously, I think the show's for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to counterbalance that too, I like the show for different reasons. I really liked the last arc. In some ways, it's my favorite. And when we're looking at sort of the length of this, I guess I wasn't. I was satisfied well enough with how each individual mystery was going that I don't mind that we're ostensibly on a cliffhanger, because they're able to wrap up the case they were on. It really didn't even occur to me until now that, like, it does, not finish the greater story, and that we do have to wait for another season. I think it's pretty common to take about this pace for, light novel and novel adaptations, about 3 or 4 episodes per book. And so, like, this is, very much following on that pace. And luckily, although you're not going to get kind of a open shut mystery in this season, you will get a couple mysteries that do get open and closed. And on top of that, they move quick, which I find is not exactly the same sentiment we can give towards something like in Spectre, which much more takes its time, really kind of lets things simmer. So if you've had sort of apprehensions about mystery novelizations being adapted into anime or film format before, then you might actually really like how this is going. Just, if you are the type that wants to finish it in one go, then definitely don't get into it yet, especially if you like it. Then you'll be itching for the next season far before it can come to fruition. So
yeah. The character designs are also really good. I think that they're very fun. Also, it takes place in a unique setting, turn of the century industrial era Europe with some Japanese backdrop pretty early on. Lots of mythological stuff that happens, but treated as an alternate timeline where it is commonplace to know that werewolves exist and vampires exist and there are monsters out there. So interesting setting. Mm-hmm. And definitely one of the big selling points to it, at least in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not a historian, but I appreciate the alternate history that they've created. It feels at the same time flagrantly mystical, right? Where it's just like they will conjure all sorts of nonsense. Like, you're gonna watch characters doing fucking air combos and stuff in this show, right? Like, it is ridiculous. Yeah. But it's that heightened sort of mythologizing of this era that on one hand makes the show, interesting for a standard crowd, but I also feel like it doesn't use it to exotify culture. It's taking sort of a globalist perspective on how it brings in characters from different parts of the world, and I'll at least say that, like, the way that they interculturally interact is for the most part convenient, where, say, everyone speaks the same language, in order for conversations to happen. But it doesn't feel like there's when there's things like intercultural tension or questions of, you know, who done it, why they did it. It doesn't feel like cultural damnation or assimilation propaganda. And in my opinion, I'd say it's quite the opposite. So for historical purposes, you know, I can't give an analysis of like, yeah, this is a good allegory for the time. But I do think that it has some interesting allegorical value these days. Perhaps it's you know, leaning too heavily on pastiche and fantasy in order to make that happen. I can't make the call on that. But hey, if there are people out there who are way into history, especially in, you know, 19th century era, then we'd love to hear your thoughts on their take of all this. So
yeah, I want it because I'm a dick. I'm just kidding. I would like. Hey, I'd like to listen to some more stuff.
Go to our comments and tell us.
Comment on us. Cool, engage with us so that the algorithm suggests us to other weebs. Yeah.
Put us one step higher than the other video that's also in the tier of 10 to 50 views. We'll see you there. Hey, I also want to talk about presentation, because I feel like that's a pretty big selling point for the contemporary
Simon Mujumdar
crowd. What?
Simon Mujumdar is a celebrity chef, and you know, you talk about presentation of the meal. Okay.
All right. So, yeah, what did you think about, you know, the production values of the show?
They got worse, which is okay. But... I think that you are allowed to make some bad shit sometimes, and I think the Undead Girl Murder Farce is one of those things that really shows that you can have bad fight scenes and bad animation and poor production values and still deliver something that's impactful and good. I think that the first two arcs are a lot better animated than the last arc, but that's not the reason that I have issues with the last arc. What do you think about presentation?
Well, before we move on from that, what do you think about presentation in the earlier parts, where it's just like, say, episode 1? You know, like
the dynamic camera work that they do a lot, where they'll have people talk and they'll start cutting it into comic book sections, is really cool. Or when they'll do some funky transitions from one thing to another to show people solving mysteries. That stuff is really good.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And that's one of the things that I was really missing in the last arc.
Yeah,
they just totally stop it, and they do some pretty awful like attempts to do it cheaply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get there.
we'll talk about that later.
But yeah,
it's still good. It's still good. Don't get me wrong. It's still a good story. But
you might just have some eyebrows raised, like just implicitly as you're watching some of those bits. But yeah, some of the really inspired stuff that you'll see is like, you know, again, not to give extreme detail here, but like they'll be talking through a theory of how, you know, the whole incident, because there always has to be an incident, how it went down. And so you might see like, oh, here's like a container tipping and there's water flowing out of it, and that water flows into someone's hair, and, you know, like it blends it, and this is all kind of like it's vertically scrolling it on the screen, so you're kind of moving from one conversation point to another as it's timed with the visuals. They like to do things with video footage spliced in, which occasionally gets a little weird because like they will do digital video effects and artifacting that is clearly out of, like, you know, the time era by far, but
like it's not a 90s show. Yeah. It's an 1890s or like a 1900s show, so seeing digital artifacting is weird, especially when you have, you know, sepia film reels right there.
Yeah, but it is also, I think, the fact that we'll shift gears from like Detective Conan talk sequence to Kingdom Hearts fight scene, really, I think doing things like, hey, here's like a video trick that clearly does not match the aesthetics of the time era. It doesn't feel that out of place. It feels like, the production team is having fun fucking around with the visuals and, is thinking less about how do we make this feel totally grounded, and instead it's like, what would be fun? There's a part where they're showing some video footage of like a very recent moment in the same episode. It's kind of like the character is thinking back to that happening, and the video footage is like flipped upside down, and it plays up to a certain point, stops, and then reverses and like plays it again, as if like someone's running it back in their head, and it clearly aesthetically doesn't match anything technologically of the time, but it doesn't have to, right? It's more meant to like surprise and fascinate you, and so it gets a pass from me. It does not bother me. There's other cool stuff it'll do, like someone's presenting the different steps of alibis, and a candle goes out with each point they make, or another video trick is that they show something that doesn't happen in the series, but they've got a little like video clip of it that they project onto the alternating squares of a like checkerboard tile floor, and so it's like the same video clip, 20 to 40 times on screen, just popped in there, layered in, with like a clipping mask effect. It's really neat. They clearly had fun with it, which is good considering that this studio has not done a lot. This is Lapin Track. They've, at least according to my anime list, they're documented to have worked on like 8 things, and not even all those things were them working on their own. And as far as I know, this is a solo studio affair, again, from what's documented. So, I think it's fair to assume that, this is kind of a challenge for them to do something like this on their own. And I'm glad, therefore, that they're not just playing it straight the whole way through. I mentioned fights, and I talked a little bit about that. Do you want to talk about fights?
Yeah, they're like you said it best. They're floaty Kingdom Hearts fights with very little rules, and sometimes it is two insanely smart people being like, "Oh, you're not actually doing this. You're actually igniting gunpowder really quickly and then launching it at people." Or it's like, oh, you thought you could get me? Just kidding. I knew this would happen. It's JoJo-esque, where it is a lot of
some Jimmy Neutron brain blast bullshit, where they will start describing, aha, you tried to do this. Like they're doing the mystery element mid-fight. And sometimes it just comes down to, like, I'm going to drag my foot through the dirt and kick it into a cloud up into your face and try to punch through it, like sometimes it's like show and tell style. Sometimes it's more just show and hell. I don't know.
Interesting thing about the director. So the director of this show is Mamoru Hatakeyama, or Hatakeyama. He's he was an episode director of Madoka Magica, just like one episode, and did storyboards for 2 of the episodes. He was the director of some things, like some lesser known things, produced some shows, but he is also the main director of Kaguya-sama Love is War, which I think makes a lot of sense in terms of how the characters talk to each other, because Kaguya-sama has kind of some of that stuff to it.
It's a lot of bite,
where they yeah, where it's a lot of shit talking and back and forth, and so that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then the script, so the person that was in charge of writing the show is Chiaki Konaka. She basically only does scripts. She's done Hellsing. She's done some ecchi shit. I'm trying to find something that people would do. She wrote 4 scripts for Mononoke, Parasite Dolls. She wrote the script for Serial Experiments Laid.
Wow, I would say it's a very different kind of show than this.
Well, she's one of the scriptwriters. Sorry, there is also Noboru Takagami, who did Bakano and Durara, and
that makes sense. Like light novel adaptations, you know.
Yes, but this is not a light novel.
Correct.
This is a book.
Yeah, it's a novel.
It's a novel, but yeah. So the scripts are people. Yeah, they exist.
Let's take that, jump that into performances of the characters.
The voice acting in the show is great. You have funny enough, the most beloved character is Shizuku Heisei, who's a maid gal, and she's voiced by Makoto Koichi, who is, let's see.
I looked through some of the voice actor profiles, and I didn't notice like a lot of things I recognized, which is kind of nice, you know, that it's not just like, oh, this hit my ear nice because I've heard this person a lot elsewhere. You know, we're getting to the point where we've heard some actors and actresses enough that we will recognize, oh, this is a Japanese voice that I've heard somewhere else, but not with this one, which is great because they're also great performances.
So the gal that voiced her kind of kicked up her performances recently. She was in Hell's Paradise and some other like 2023 stuff. So she's been in the game since 2016, but this is like her year. Mm-hmm. Taku Yashiro voices our boy Sugaro Shinuchi. He's done things like things that people might know. He's in Liar Liar, which I heard is the worst show of this season.
Certainly not from his performance.
He's also kind of like, he was Hirokazu and Chainsaw Man. He was, I'm trying to look at like once again, not a lot of big names. He was a guy in Kaguya-sama. And once again, he's been in it since like 2014, but a lot of his recent stuff is where he's getting like main roles. Mm-hmm. So good for him. And then our other big lead is Tomio Kurosawa, who voices Aya, or the headless gal. She was Pink in Maho Shoujo Magical Destroyers.
Oh my gosh.
And then she's the main character in Skip to Loafer.
Ah, fun.
And she's Vash the Stampede in Trigon Stampede.
Wow.
So she was Rebecca in Cyberpunk Edgerunners. So this gal is
yeah, we've got some folks that are really doing business lately.
She's also South Dakota and Azure Lane, which I talked about in Magical Girl Destroyers. I just love that there's a character that exists named South Dakota. All right. So real quick, if you're still on the fence and you're like, oh, I like that you're talking about this. I don't know if I explained the plot of it. So we'll do the basic plot synopsis, and then we'll move into spoiler territory. Yeah. Plot synopsis of the show. Sugaru Shinuchi is a Oni Slayer. So he is a half human, half devil, who worked in a carnival killing monsters for show. And he kind of did it as a form of suicide, in a sense. He knew that eventually his demon part would take over and he'd kill a bunch of people, so he wanted to be in a place where the people that he killed deserved it, or at least deserved it a little bit by watching the suffering of all these monsters. But he gets called into action by Aya, who is a headless girl from like 1,000 years ago. And she is an immortal who needs Sugaru to help find who stole her body. Because she's alive, but she's missing her body.
And coincidentally, Sugaru needs to find these people as well.
Yes, they are looking for the same person. Who's Moriarty from the fucking Sherlock Holmes books. Yeah. And then they are joined by Shizuku Heisei, who is a maid of Aya and is just an overall badass. She has a big old rifle with a sword on the end. It's cool as fuck. They travel Europe to solve mysteries regarding paranormal folk, but normally on the side of the supernatural. Yeah. They do the supernatural investigations because humans don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. And they have the empathy and experience to understand why people might react in certain ways or take out certain actions.
Yeah. So, with that being said, let's talk about the show in a spoiler way. So if you are listening to this and you're like, that show sounds really cool, go watch it. Because don't listen to us explain what the show is. Go watch it yourself.
Enjoy yourselves.
But for those who have watched, and for those who watched it and want us to kind of break down and give us our little bit deeper opinions on it, stick around, and we'll also talk about themes and analyze it as a piece of media. So in 1897, that's when it starts. Westernization is sort of happening all over the world, and Japan is experiencing it. So, as we mentioned, Aya comes to find Sugaru Shinichi so that they can save each other's lives, essentially. The first episode is really good. It really shows the more human side of Sugaru, and I don't mean that in like a he's half demon, but it shows that he really cares about the people that are being exploited, and he helps protect a cat who eventually gets killed, and he finds it really sad, and then he fights Shizuku Heisei, and that fight scene's dope as fuck. It's really well animated. It's really dynamic. I really enjoy it. One of my favorite scenes in this is when Sugaru is talking to Aya, and they're doing this overhead shot, and they're like tracking them as they go through the winding village of this small Japanese town, and I really like that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really amazing piece of tone setting, I feel. It's a bit of a shame because I feel like the rest of the show's tone is a little more irreverent and flighty. This episode's pretty heavy, and it's kind of expected that you're gonna walk into this and you're gonna see, like, mostly, Sugaru is not in a good place, and therefore, like, you're using your insight and the show's visuals and its sort of construction to gather up a sense of like where his mental position is at, and it's pretty dire. But again, I think it's well done, that it doesn't feel overly melodramatic. It feels very mature. It doesn't feel like it's pulling punches, and yet it's also not indulging in like explicating, trying to like traumatic, expressions of things, or trying to, sort of shove your face in the nastiness of it. I know that before we had finished watching the show, Grant and I decided to go watch an episode of Akame ga Kill. And I'm glad we did, because it really put into perspective, I think, how good this show is at not doing what that show does, which is really just kill any sense of nuance. So I guess nuance is what I'm trying to say is here, right? The show takes you seriously as a viewer, and doesn't underestimate your ability to read the feelings and unique experiences of these characters, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. If I had to pick a favorite moment, I don't know if I could, but I really do like how much time we get with Sugaru, particularly because, like, he's acting very mellow on the outside, clearly pretty roughed up on the inside, and we won't see that really after this. And that's a good thing. Suguru, when traveling with Aya and Shizuku, ends up much happier, because he's essentially being liberated, liberated from, his oppressors in the form of, an entertainment business, which gets its kicks from using him as a monster, quote unquote, to, enact blood sport, and also freeing him from himself, in that, like, I have only so much time before I just collapse under the monster side of myself, aka, fall into a hopelessness that overtakes me. And I'm going to, sort of walk into that silently until I can't take it anymore, go out in a, fantastical and violent show. I'll make the people pay for what they've done to me, and then that will be that. There won't be me after that. But that's not what happens. Not when Aya and Shizuku, connect with him. When he gets to meet other people with similar goals and, similar marginalization, he gets the chance to actually, start to take his life seriously again, and really put to the test that flame that's in him that does want to keep living. There's a part, I can say I have a favorite part. He's talking with kind of the operations runner, where he basically will fight other monsters for entertainment. It's a boxing style blood sport sort of thing, and it's sensationalized because he is half Oni, and he is fighting other monsters. It's a very vicious kind of affair. They have a slight side commentary about, like, the performance aspect of it. And the owner / showrunner, basically says, you're no performers. Which Suguru is at heart. And so he just kind of takes that on the chin. But then to see in every episode after this that he gets to act goofy and lively, he's poetic and theatrical, right?
He'll do he'll tell the fables.
He's doing Rakugo
while
sets
he's fighting.
He's traveling and fighting and everything. He comes alive after this episode, and so I sense maybe there might be some people that are like, oh, I liked when there was more nuance about Suguru and his character, but frankly, I think the point gets made, that he was in a bad place, and that there's, when given community and resources, that you get to live, you get to live on multiple levels.
Yeah, well, and I think that is something that is important, is that Suguru is not he's not depressed, right? He's not sad. He's just pissed at the situation he was given, but he's still a performer, right? He's still a guy who wants to have fun and enjoy it. And once that out is there, he doesn't really need to relinquish the fact that, or relish in the fact that he is half Oni, right? He has an out, and that gives him the hope for the rest of the show. Yeah, it's not nearly as nuanced, but I think it does show that there's something more to him than just, I am a demon man, and there's a demon inside me. He's more than that. And I think that's why this is great.
Yeah, and safe to say, he's not even my favorite character in the show. It's a hefty competition, and I really love Aya and Shizuku. But I'll save my comments on them maybe as we go along through the other cases.
Yeah, we'll talk about our characters as we go. So after they kind of meet together, they start going around the world, and a year passes in between the first episode and the second episode. And they have become known as the Cage User, where it is a detective that goes around carrying a cage, and everyone just thinks it's Suguru and the maid. And then once, of course, they unveil the cage because they bring Aya around in a little bird cage. It's like, oh, there's actually a very smart headless woman inside this cage. I do also want to make it clear that Suguru has to make out with Aya to extend his life.
He needs to drink her saliva.
Which I think is not great.
I think it could have been far worse.
Yes,
like that.
That's the thing.
They on screen show that it's kind of an uncomfortable thing, right? For one, like, I don't know if this is like considered a proactive defense of this, but Aya being thousands of years old, that's demonstrated in her personality. She's, self-assured. They don't even do gags where it's like, oh, she's thousands of years old, but she actually is a brat. They don't do that shtick. She's just someone who has lived that long. And so, like...
She acts like it.
Yeah. So the fact that, like, she was 14 when immortalized, I don't think becomes problematic in them smooching to literally swap spit.
Yeah. She also doesn't look 14. Like, there is another, like, character in the show that is 14 who looks more like a teenager. I always thought that she looked like... She doesn't look like a child.
Yeah. And there's a far more interesting problematizing factor with the whole, like, kiss factor. And that's that when Suguru and Aya first make out, quote unquote, they do a very quick blink and you miss it look at Shizuku, who bites her lip in discomfort. And I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, I think they know what they're doing, right? I trust them to handle this in a way that's tactful and interesting and thought through. We'll get more to that later.
Yeah. So the second episode, they are hired to investigate the murder of a vampire. So the vampire family has sworn off drinking human blood, and it seems that vampires reproduce in a manner similar to humans because they have an entire family, not just like adults. Mm-hmm. And they treat them like they're kids. And the mom has been murdered. And so there's this... They want to figure out who did it because as the vampires of this area, they don't kill people. And they don't see any reason why a person would want to kill kill them. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of this interesting who's done it, but also... are the vampires telling the truth? And so we get a lot of dialogue between Suguru and Aya. With one of my favorite is like Suguru says something like, "How can you trust a girl with no chest?" And it's supposed to be like, "Haha, small boobs," but in reality, it's because Aya is just ahead. And there's also the part where they're like, "You should be dead," and she's like, "Well, I'm actually alive, so I can't be dead." And I just think that the bluntness between the characters is very funny. Yep. And so the vampire is killed with a silver stake, which they left in the storeroom, and the body has been murdered without any struggle. And so they don't know who does it, and all of this happens in 24 minutes, and then it's over. It was one of the fastest episodes I've ever seen.
Yeah, the time dilation is messed up when you start watching some of these episodes.
Yeah.
Your perception of time may differ in strange and mysterious ways.
So, I really liked this episode because it kind of does paint this like rift between paranormal creatures like vampires and humans in a way where the vampires are upset because they think a human did it because vampires can't touch silver, and it was a silver stake. And they talk about how even with all the stuff they've done, how could a human come in here and kill her? And they talk about how, oh, we don't want to put any blame on the two humans that work for us, which is a maid and a butler. And there's still this like level of distrust and I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
You have anything to say about episode 2?
Not in particular. I do think that of these cases, the vampire family, or otherwise known as a vampire, is, maybe a group of characters you don't get to know as well as some of the other secondary characters you meet later on, or at least maybe they didn't quite stick with me as much as some other cases. But that being said, the case is interesting enough and tightly written enough that that doesn't pose an issue, and it's a small scope enough that it doesn't ever feel like the case is kind of meandering. From the get-go, you've got a really snappy sort of flow to all of this, and I think that maintains up through the entire case.
Yes. I also like that during the time where when she's asking the different questions about that they want the answer, Suguru is holding up the numbers on his fingers, and it's just very funny. It's kind of like the performer in him, right? He's interpreting her dialogue with his body because she doesn't have one, and I really like that a lot.
Yeah. Aya as a character on paper is not that interesting, but her performance and execution of this character is where it really shines, right? Like, they use her as a headless character in so many funny ways. It never stops getting old when a character comes up and like waves their hand underneath the cage to see if it's like an illusion. Her matter-of-factness and also her ability to use dry humor just works, and I like that there's a dynamic between she and Tsugaru, where they have this kind of like, they haven't known each other all that long, but they already are like, kind of running an act, right? Like,
yes,
when Aya makes rude comments about Tsugaru, he plays it off not dejectedly in reaction, but he plays it forward as a bit. And vice versa, Aya can take the heat and then, sort of turn it around with her wit, It's nice. There's never a dull moment with them.
Yeah, they're great.
So Vampire Part 2.
Vampire Part 2. So they do some more sleuthing, and they come up, and this is one of the other problems with the show, is I forgot that the first arc was 3 episodes and not 2. And so they come up with an idea that it is either the oldest son, Claude, or Alfred the butler. But I can't find enough facts to really pin it on someone. And so they go into the woods with Goddard, and they're attacked by a vampire hunter. And Suguru and Aya stop Goddard from killing... Oh, Goddard is the head vampire, in case I didn't mention that. And they stop him from killing the hunter, and then they ask the hunter, why were you here? And the hunter says that he's gone to the mansion before to try and kill a vampire, and he knew someone on the inside that was willing to help him, but when that person didn't return, the hunter tried to complete the mission without the person on the inside. So they let the hunter go, and then they bring everyone to the murder. And once again, it shows that interesting dynamic between the humans and the vampires, and in essence, the humans and your paranormal, supernatural friends or neighbors. And what makes it nice is that Aya and Suguru are like, hey, let's not murder this guy right here, because even though he was going to kill you, there are reasons we shouldn't kill him, because he's important, and also, if you show him mercy, it might make less vampire hunters happen in the future. And I like that. I like their outlook on it. But once again, not really there's not a lot of stuff that happens in this episode besides some conversations, but the density and the way that the dialogue is written is so enthralling that you don't even realize you've been talked at for 20 minutes.
And I think this starts a pattern where these cases tend to open up with a lot of investigation up front. Then there's a twist, like something gets in the way or obfuscates the clues. Someone is intervening where they shouldn't, perhaps. And then eventually the case comes to a close when, all these things considered, all the facts get to, sort of lay out. Maybe the one or two missing things have finally fallen into place. The resolutions to these cases end up being, I feel, they're not convoluted, but they're also not easy to intuit. So, this like second episode in the format is kind of where we jostle things up a bit, and make it harder to just sort of guess, like, yeah, I bet it's this, or yeah, I bet it's that.
Yeah. And so we get the final episode of this arc, and it turns out it was the younger brother, Raul, and he did the fucking ice bullet.
Mm-hmm.
He froze holy water and stabbed his mom with the holy water, and used the silver stake that the hunter brought as a diversion, because you can use the holy water as a vampire if you don't touch it, but using a stake is a little bit harder. And so he used it as a way to make it think that it was a human when it was reality and him. And they solved the case by murdering the shit out of Raul. Suguru and Aya don't fuck around. They tend to just murder people if they think that they are not
Did they actually straight up kill him? As opposed to incapacitating him?
Yeah, Suguru, incapacitates him and lets him die by sunlight.
Oh.
And the dad's like, wow, that sucks that I lost my son, but thank you for doing it. It's fucked. Yeah. There's a couple things in here that you wonder if it was a death or not. And sometimes they are a little unclear. And that was
at
one
the
of
very
them.
least, if there's any ambiguity, it's because they're spending their showtime on what's more important, which is explicating how it got done. And making the fight scene at length look cooler, and things like that. I think that they have their priorities pretty well straightened out, or at least it aligns well with our tastes. I've said, I think the family is kind of written pretty flatly in this case, but what really matters is them as an elemental factor here. Their vampiric nature, some very basic archetypes, as to
and now
how they interact.
Some whack shit, because now the show goes fucking off the rails in a good
racial
way.
Contention. And so, I think that they do a good job of, keeping it squarely on those archetypes, not as who would do it based on aggression, who would do it based on this or that. Instead, they focus on, all right, what's a larger factor here that plays with the culture of this family, and they sort of use it as a generalization. I think it does well to not make this feel targeted or cruel, and instead you walk out of this with a sense of lingering solitude and sympathy of damn, that happened, and that says something about this little pocket of community that we've gotten to know in these 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, can I mention one thing about episode 4?
Fine.
This is where we get one of our first gigantic editing blunders. You can check my math on this. Go to 6 minutes and 20 seconds into the episode, and there's a botched green screen effect.
Oh, there's a couple of botched green screens effects.
Yeah,
that happens quite a bit in this show.
The ones that I have a special note of are this one in episode 4. There's 2 in episode 13 at least.
Where is it at?
So
6:30.
6:20 in episode 4, and I'll skip ahead a little bit. Episode 13 at 27 seconds. Episode 13, 2 minutes 32 seconds.
Yeah. Well, also in it's really weird because you see a similar thing happen in episode 2, where the vampires get all shocked by the nature, and they have red outlines.
Yeah, so they're doing a chroma key, transparency effect in order to layer hey, we have our characters in the foreground, we have a painted background, and we need to do something where maybe the characters show up before or after the background, and therefore need to be sort of separated. They sometimes will be transitioning, the character will appear in the foreground and the background fades in after them for dramatic effect as sort of spotlighting or for a transitional effect. And so when they do these ambitious little tricks, something for some reason went wrong on the technical level. This is not just it looks wonky. We're talking you can see the jagged little pixels meant for color masking. It's very obvious. Yeah. There is definitely something that got missed completely, and it might be something that wasn't on the original copy of the episode, where if they have a main copy, but when they exported it or something, that's when it happened. It's baffling. I don't know how this made it to release. And I can't just assume it's an accident. They got an older copy and showed that, because it happens in multiple episodes. And it's clear that they can do the effect properly. You'll see effects done similarly that have no issues at all, right? Where they're doing layering effects, especially in combat sequences in which they're doing some, quick movements from one background to another.
1334 in episode 2 has the same thing.
Yeah, and as you mentioned they'll have, moving graphics of frames and frames that are, moving one over another as sort of we're passing one point of argumentation, and it's transforming as they talk. Or we kind of shift perspectives from one to another as those frames cross over each other on screen. Those are also effects that require layering and transparency, but even so, those don't have the same error. So it's something that something fell through the cracks. I feel bad that it happened. But in any case, it did. I guess just goes to show that flaws occur. It does not ruin the show by any means. I think it just in a way humanizes the production crew.
Yeah, absolutely. We also forgot a secondary character gets introduced during this time, and that's Annie Kerbler, who is a Parisian 14-year-old journalist who follows around Aya and Suguru to report on their doings, and that is a fun character trope.
Yep.
I like it a lot. She's fine. She's good. But she's the character that looks 14 and acts 14 and sounds 14.
Right. Compared to Aya, so.
It's compared to Aya, who does not, because she's not, even though she was immortalized at that age. It's good. It's a good way to show why they're not doing it in a problematic fashion. But at any rate, so we get to the second arc, which is fucking buck wild. It is just not League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Is that it?
I mean, that's a phrase I've heard.
It starts with Lupin recruiting the Phantom of the Opera to steal a black diamond called Penultimate Night from Phileas Fogg's mansion. Now, Phileas Fogg is the protagonist of Around the World in 80 Days. So there's another big ol' connection. Mm-hmm. And so Phileas Fogg hires 4 detectives to protect his diamond, and that is Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, Aya, and Suguru. So it is just one of those things where not only do vampires and Count Dracula exist, also it is confirmed that Count Dracula got offed by humans. That is not super important, but it is true. But also...
Oh, I thought in the show. I thought you meant in real life. You just...
Yeah, I mean,
like, oh, by the way, in case you didn't get the news, we did kill Dracula. Mystery solved.
We got him. And so they go to London, and it does have a really funny part where these twins try and steal Aya's head, and she's like in a car. She drives past Suguru and just screams, and it's fucking great. But yes, and at the same time, there is a group of other villains from European folklore, like James Moriarty, Aleister Crowley, Carmilla, who is from she predates Dracula. She was published in a serial called The Dark Blue, which is young woman being preyed upon by a female vampire named Carmilla. So that there's Victor,
who's actually Frankenstein's monster, but call him Victor.
Yeah, and then there's Jack the Ripper, who is also an Oni. So just like Suguru, Jack the Ripper is also part Oni, like Suguru. So sort of like his foil.
His shadow to his son,
so they so there are 4 groups of people that want this diamond. There are the detectives, there is the banquet, because Lupin and the Phantom of the Opera, while not on the sides of our protagonists, aren't necessarily antagonists. They're just thieves. And then there is a group of insurance agents.
It's the Royce Advisory Security Department and their insurance agents, which really means they're like hired assassins in this case.
Yes. So
yeah, the top insurance agents are the ones that actually come kill people. So kind of like real life, if you think about it. I don't know, that was a little dark.
So you meet, so the insurance agents are antagonistic, but in a different way. They're cops. And so
they're here to protect property.
Yes. And so they show these security methods, which is this impenetrable vault and a safe with a puzzle safe inside the vault. And if you try and get to it, it floods the room. And they try to figure out how Lupin would get in. And so it's a good episode. Once again, the dialogue really carries it. And we also get some Goemon Japanese folklore in it as well. Yeah, so this episode was kind of like, I didn't know if they would be able to succeed in it. I was like, ooh, I don't know, man. This is kind of potentially bad. But I thought it was really good.
We are not strangers to shows with too many characters. They can't handle all of them at the same time. In fact, sometimes it feels like, I mean, we reviewed Yuki Yuna is a Hero, the Great Monkai chapter recently, and that has far fewer characters than this show, and we already thought that was too many for them to juggle. But because they're working with these, like, larger-than-life characters, and they're kind of remixing them, it means that they don't have to spend an extreme amount of time characterizing them, right? You get what you expect, and if it's character type that you don't know, if you're like, I don't know who Aleister Crowley is, then that's okay. You'll get the gist because he's got a big top hat, and he snaps his fingers, and people die, like, okay, bastard magician, got it, it all plays very pragmatically, and I think that goes for the writing in general. This is, ultimately a mystery show, and so it's very good about showing its hand on things that you need to have as information, which would be like, very brusque character personalities. You need to know what those characters' abilities are. They're going to show that to you pretty upfront. You're going to literally be an insider on, the plans of everybody who's involved. But they'll tuck away the things that, can be entertaining for surprise. And so it feels like you're getting lots and lots of information. Not so much that it, kills the mystery. Not so little that you are like, wait, who the hell is this again? So yeah, I think that they've done this well. It's an extension of what they do in the vampire case, where these characters are not like going through the deep fleshing out phase that we might get with our main trio, but they don't have to, right? Ultimately they are players in this game, and if you really want to kind of sit down and steep these characters into a deeper analysis, you can do it with the historical context and the implications of the story in mind. So it doesn't, if you're really here for like deep character nuance and like sort of a rich fleshed out backstory for each of these characters like you get in episode 1, you're not going to get that. But I also don't think you need it. So that's my thought. And this episode is one of those where it is going to get you through the front-loaded details so that the rest can flow smooth like butter.
Yes, and so...
Butter doesn't flow. Wait, it's solid. Hold on.
Liquid butter. Drink it up.
There's
that's what this episode is sponsored by. Just pure liquid butter.
Future note to Brantley. Insert Granny Cream .wave right here. Granny Cream's hot butter ice cream.
So we get some stuff where Lupin comes in to talk to Sherlock and Watson disguised as someone, and then he basically makes this huge declare that he's going to steal Fogg's treasure, and this is where Suguru lost Aya's cage because he accidentally switched it with a parrot. The twins from the original, the twin thieves from the original, try and steal her head. And there's also a really gruesome part where they just like run over Aya and just like destroy her. But since she's immortal, she just like comes back together. But it's pretty brutal, yeah. And then Lupin, or Lupin, sorry.
With my voice echoing in the back of your head, like say it,
Lupin.
Say it right.
Is like, hey, cage users, I'm also going to steal the diamond. Can you stop me? And then he fights Suguru with marble magic. And so they go inside the secure chamber to watch the safe, and to keep the safe, and Sherlock jams the safe so that Watson, Fogg, and some inspector guy are stuck inside, and what happens is there's an explosion as the banquet starts to infiltrate this mansion and just murder a shit ton of cops. Just so many cops get murdered here in very brutal fashion. And so our intrepid, not our main heroes, but their allies are slowly gonna get drowned. And so then we meet the insurance folk here, which is Fatima Double Darts and what's his fucking name?
And the less cool one.
Yeah, and the less cool one, Reynold Stingheart. Fatima Double Darts rules. She's cool, and so they break open the chamber to save Sherlock and Fogg and Watson, but the inspector is missing, which means that Lupin disguised himself as the inspector, and the Phantom of the Opera took the safe through the broken vent, but Sherlock hid the diamond in Watson's jacket. It wasn't in the safe. But Lupin grabs the diamond and escapes because that's just what happens. Because Lupin is still disguised as the inspector, and so they kind of go around to determine what happened to the safe. And Sherlock's like, I actually stole it, and then they lose. But when they arrive at the greenhouse, Io was inside the safe the whole time because they knew that this would happen, because they are one step ahead of everybody. So Shizuku and Suguru prepare to fight Lupin and the Phantom of the Opera, but then the fucking insurance company comes in and fucks everything up. And you find out the insurance company is there to also steal the diamond. So everybody just wants this diamond. Now we get into this massive, brutal battle between the Banquet, the Royce agents, Lupin, Fatima. Everyone is fighting each other. It is a fun time. Was there any fight during this time that you particularly liked?
The part when Reynold, Sugaru, and Lupin, I think, yeah, are literally backlit by the bright yellow moon, and they're flailing around in midair, like practically swimming cartoon style, in order to beat the shit out of each other and try to grab the jewel. It's the most cartoony nonsense, perhaps in the entire show, and it's so works. It's just so memorable that, like, because it's nonsense. They're like, hey, welcome to our world of magic and mystery. Would you like to see these people levitate? And no, one of them is not the magician. They've literally stopped their air momentum so they can try to wheel around and kick somebody else who's reaching out for the jewel, and they're like, it's Looney Tunes shit. It's so great. And yet it has this like this artistic quality to it where it's nicely backlit, and framed within the circle. It's so funny how they take the composition very seriously when it's physically entirely unserious. It's a nice little microcosm of what this show means to me.
Yes, I love that. So yeah, you get a couple different fights. Oh. What were you?
There's also the part where Reynold cuts an entire like pillar down.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, don't worry, this whole place is insured.
Oh, it's so good.
Which is hilarious, because as an insurance agent, he's just willfully doing damage because it's supposed to be covered.
It's so funny.
It's such an example of his level of bastardry that, he'll willfully do damage and make work for other people later to repair that and to construct it again. Because he has a fucking hard-on for anime violence. It's great.
It's great. So essentially the fights go into Carmilla versus Shizuku, Lupin, Suguru, and Reynold. Fatima double darts fighting the Phantom of the Opera, and Sherlock Holmes and Watson fighting Aleister Crowley. And it's a lot of fun. It kind of reminds me of episode 6 of Star Wars, where you have Luke and Darth Vader fighting in the throne room while the airspace battle led by Lando is happening outside, and Han Solo and Leia are on Endor trying to get down the shield generator. It's all these things happening at one time, and you get excited to go back and forth. You're like, oh, we're back here. Oh, we're back here. So it's really fun. I really like that. You get some... And
it doesn't feel disorienting either.
No.
There's a part where Aya and Alice there just have a conversation. And he just straight out reveals, he's like, so what's your deal? And she starts explaining it, and he's like, I think we have your body. And then boom, here comes Moriarty, and all that. But it's goof shit. It's great.
It's goofy, but for some reason it works in a way that isn't it's terrible. It's
clown shoes with a nice polish, and
they're wearing a suit.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And so as these stuff fights on, you find out that Sherlock and Watson managed to push back Aleister Crowley. Carmilla manages to poison Shizuku with lesbian poison is the only way that...
Aphrodisiac.
Yeah, and it's just like, everyone's like, man, I want to fuck this vampire so hard. She is so sexualized in this show. The vampire lady. Like, her ass is, like, bouncing. It's so comical. It's so fucking out there, and it is, like, the only fan service in this entire show.
It's amazing that so much of it is lesbian concentrate.
Oh yeah.
But I'm gonna save all of my thoughts on Shizuku and by extension Carmilla for a big block later, so it doesn't take a lot of time right now. So stay tuned.
So as all these fights happen, then Jack the Ripper comes in and brutally murders Fatima and Reynold, which is a big disappointment for me. I was really upset by the death of Fatima Double Darts. It made me so mad.
Yeah, she was great.
And the worst part is Suguru uses her heart as a distraction. It's fucked.
Yeah.
It's so fucked. Lupin and Eric, the Phantom of the Opera, leave. And Moriarty shows up, and that he has Aya's body, and also that he turned a couple people into Oni, which means he's the one that turned Suguru into an Oni. And he wants to add werewolf blood to Jack to make him more powerful. But they grab the diamond, and they basically murdered a bunch of people, and they're like, haha, we won. But Suguru stole the diamond before they could get away, so that's pretty dope.
Mm-hmm.
This arc was fun. This arc is not as serious as the other two arcs, but it really shows the goof shit that the show knows how to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this arc is gunpowder, like, it's explosive, all the way through. Aside from, some characterization front loading, like, it's the most you're going to get from combat. You're going to see a lot of action, even when it's not, like, deliberate sort of fight scenes. Which is kind of funny considering that this is the Sherlock Holmes bit, Yeah. Yeah, so if you're looking for the high octane stuff, you're going to get it right in the middle of the show. I'll say this is another moment where we get, like, very, like, little exclusive moments of the character dynamics working in interesting ways. When they've all reconvened after their respective fights, Shizuku walks in all battered, and Aya's just like, oh, you're back, good work. She's clearly, like, roughed up hard, but, Aya doesn't patronize her by being like, oh no, are you okay? Because Aya knows Shizuku's okay. Shizuku's gone to hell and back for Aya, right? It's a little piece of character history for them, and you can tell that Shizuku, like, appreciates that amount of trust because she, like, smiles back, it's good, right? Like, I know we haven't talked as much about, like, the character dynamics of the trio, but know that these little things are happening constantly. They're always amusing, and I really frankly think that they both foil each other and gel with each other completely. That Suguru and Aya and Shizuku and Suguru, any of those combinations, right, are working back and forth in ways that contrast and complement each other.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is good. And now our contentious one, the last arc, the werewolf village
in hell.
The thing is I really like most of this arc. There's just some choices that are a little odd to me. So, yeah. The overarching thing is that there is a pregnant werewolf that is murdered by the werewolves for well, okay, so there was a 8 years before this, a werewolf was attacked by a group of villagers, but she sacrificed hers to save her daughter. Suguru, Aya, and Shizuka search the area for werewolves near the village of Hulendorf, and they find out that on rainy nights, girls are abducted and then found dead from their village. And you find that the latest girl, Louise, has been taken, and if they don't find out who the killer is, she'll be murdered. And so they have to find out the killer. And you find out, like, the werewolves have this weird thing where when a girl turns 13, they become like a priestess, which is basically just like being sexually abused by the rest of the werewolf villages to produce stronger offspring, right? They're trying to breed the ultimate werewolf. And so you find out that the werewolves sacrificed a pregnant woman named Rosa, who gave birth to Jute, but they were both killed because they have this thing where they stack up logs and they remove the logs if they lie, but the lie is determined by the mayor, who is this old woman. And so this is a hard one to explain.
There's a lot more cultural unpacking that has to be done.
Yes.
Which can feel a little odd because in the end, not that much of it is central to how the murders are happening, right?
Yes.
It acts as sort of the flavoring, and you know, that sounds really kind of diminutive, but it's the setting for where these things take place and why. But it's not as if like, the way that they were burned in this tower is, crucial to understanding the mystery. That's a detail that just has to be, kind of eliminated from the case later. Like it's a red herring. When there's, a lot of explanation of here's how these things are done, their customs and traditions, they're not used as parts of the Rube Goldberg machine of murder, right? In fact, the murder we'll find ends up being relatively, like, simple. It's not heavily convoluted or contrived. But that being said, it means that you're getting information in two different layers, right? You're getting a lot of, this really heavy cultural saturation, and that's not functionalized. I don't think it should be, but I think it's also part of the reason why this arc might feel odd compared to something like the vampire arc, which was very much this, like, crime of passion, right? You needed some of those cultural details to know exactly why someone acted out.
Yes.
The complications here don't play in such a streamlined format.
Yes. And so essentially what happens is more insurance people come, and that is
Alice Rapid Shot and
Kyle Chaintail. And so they're here because
they're trying to get ahead of the banquet.
That's right. They want to kill the werewolves so that they cannot use the werewolf blood to make Jack stronger.
Yep, it's a hammer to nail sort of solution.
Yes, they're not good people.
Well, individually, some of them might be, like, we've seen, like, Fatima and Kyle, I think, are relatively, like, good-natured, given the chance.
Yeah, but Kyle did kill a bunch of people.
It's true, right?
By smashing their heads with chains because he wanted to. Because that is the way that they thought to prevent these evil people from taking these innocent people's blood, was just to kill the innocent people.
Yeah, the vehicle of their imposition is to enact violence, right?
Yes.
Like, and so some of them, their personalities already seem fit for that. Like Alice is a firecracker. Reynold is, already kind of pretentious. Fatima and Kyle's affect doesn't communicate that, but all the same, right? They're hired as, highly skilled assassins, and so they also have that like moral separation, the readiness to kill.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
They are willing to kill for the state, and that makes them bad.
Not unlikable, but
bad.
Right.
Yes, they are very charming. And so you find out that Rosa and Jute. Rosa was trialed and almost murdered by the werewolf village, but she went to the human village when that didn't succeed. She gave birth to Jute. Rosa was killed, and Jute was also killed in a fire. After they were both identified as werewolves, despite the fact that they basically lived in this village and didn't harm anyone. And then they surround a girl's house, that Alma, and she claims that she killed and ate Louise before she transforms into the golden wolf that has been seen. And she's impervious to the silver bullets. So Shizuku fights her, but Shizuku is knocked into a waterfall, and no one thinks that she's dead, which I think is based as hell.
Oh, she's dead, Grant. She's dead.
Like
she disappeared over the waterfall.
But not only did we not think she was dead, Aya and Suguru didn't think she was dead, which I think is awesome. They were like, "Oh man, that's gonna be an inconvenience. We'll have to find her later."
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. I really liked that they had so much trust in their friend wouldn't die by falling off a waterfall, and they're right.
Let's go get her.
Yep, I like that a lot.
Where would she end up?
Yeah,
that's the next thought.
Yes. So the diamond that they got earlier allows them to find the werewolf village. And Shizuku awakes in there, and there are 3 girls keeping her warm in a very, very heterosexual way.
For sure, definitely, 100%.
100%. No gay stuff.
Would we lie to you, folks?
No gay stuff happening here. No, it's very gay.
Yes.
And the leader of the girls is a young girl named Nora, who tells Shizuku that young werewolf girls are being murdered on the nights of forests, just like the young human girls. But their faces are covered in buckshot, and they are unable to be looked at their face. And so they try and get Shizuku out of the village, but Nora is murdered in the forest. And so they find Nora, but Shizuku, using her detective skills that she got from Aya, determines that Nora was not shot here, she was shot elsewhere. And during this time, the Royce agents fight. They're going down with Tsugaru and Aya, and they fight Moriarty's monster, who's Victor Frankenstein, who is both the scientist and the monster in this story. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that episode's good. I really liked the werewolf girls. Mm-hmm. I know that you liked this episode a lot, so I want to get some time to talk about it.
We'll wait till the end.
Okay. So
I
this
like it for very transparent reasons, but
yes.
But I do like that this is a Shizuku episode. Her character is, primarily understated, and that's like who she is, right? Mm-hmm. She downplays herself in favor of Aya, and furthermore, she doesn't see the need to speak when there's no reason to, right? But here's a chance for her to demonstrate that she's just as capable as Suguru and Aya. Not that there was any doubt of it before, but it's nice that each character gets time to do some mystery solving, right? There's never a moment where it's just settled that okay, yeah, Suguru's not helpful for mystery solving, but he's funny, all of them are smart. All of them are capable of using logic and inference to contribute to these cases, right? It's
Mhm.
vital that they're all working together. And I love that, right? It's not an extremely lopsided crime solving team, you know. And so like just the fact that because Shizuku's character like personality is very downplayed most of the time, giving her a chapter to herself feels really refreshing, right? Yeah, that's my main thought on it.
Good. Yeah, it's a good episode. So in the next one, Suguru and Aya accidentally lead the humans to the werewolf village, and they start to murder the shit out of the werewolves. But before that, Aya figures out that Luis's parents abandoned her in the woods, hoping that she would die because of her disability. But Luis was rescued by Jute, the werewolf, who eventually Luis told on. So the reason that Jute and Rosa got attacked is because Luis told everyone that Jute and her mom were werewolves because she needed to try and prove to the village that she was worth, even though she was disabled. And the humans attack the werewolf village and just murder the shit out of the werewolves. It's pretty brutal and doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
And it kind of, the reason I don't like this is because I feel like Suguru and Aya allowing this to happen was really out of character for them. Mm-hmm. They showed a lot of sympathy for the vampire hunter earlier, but allowing the human, and like it could be chalked down to oops, you guys made a fucky wucky and left the secret tunnel open, but they're kind of smarter than that, and so it's a little weird to me that they did that, and then they just kind of allowed it to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's not like the werewolves are particularly good, but a lot of innocent people died because of them, and they didn't really show any remorse for it.
Yeah,
I wasn't a big fan of that part.
It is a weird depiction. It's a moment where they're prioritizing the case over, the more clear human interest issue at hand, to put it lightly. And so like we get this extreme violence that's happening as a result of that. It's a little cold, right? And perhaps it's because we've got, considering their stories, Aya, who's someone who's relatively, no nonsense, and kind of has her own, sense of justice that she's, applying. We have Suguru, who is someone that, having gone through the ringer of, this sort of like intercultural violence, you'd think is inclined to intervene, but in this case, it's not convenient, and therefore they don't. It could be that it's like, well, we're two people, and although you're immortal and I'm superpowered, this is just going to go out of control anyways, so the quickest way to solve this is to solve the mystery. It's nasty, right? And so, yeah, I think it's uncomfortable. It's a good way to put it.
Like I said, it just kind of feels outside of their character, because they don't even talk about it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It just happens.
This all comes to, this is a 13-episode show, and even then, it's still packed pretty tight. I wonder if maybe this scenario, the way it's written, did not give them the flexibility they were hoping for, or they ended up sacrificing some of the breadth of the novelization to crunch this down. It feels like a lot explodes fast. Like there is a, it's a racialized violence power keg that just kind of goes off. And so yeah, it does feel insensitive that they don't really commentate on that. there is kind of an underlying sentiment of like, look what these two villages have wrought on each other, which is, what we'll find is, the motive for the string of murders. But there's no time spent on kind of unpacking that. Aside from like, look what y'all did, look what you all have done. I mean, yeah, this is also the largest scale, thing that we've seen so far, where we had lots of characters in the, jewel heist case, but this case is about, distinctly two communities at odds. Their interactions with each other, their own internal flaws. We have, a matter of, ableism intersecting with, sort of spiritual tradition and problematic senses, and there's like a vector of sexism in that as well. It's complex, and I think you're right to point out that them not taking lots of time to be sensitive with this is not a good move.
Yes. There's also one other thing about this that I'm not a big fan of, but we'll get to that. So after that, Aya sends one of the werewolf girls, Vera, who is friends with Shizuku, to go and dig the nearby grave of Jute to see her corpse. And it turns out the corpse isn't there. So Suguru fights Kyle to save Victor, knocks Kyle out, and then Victor gives the diamond back to Suguru and tells where Aya's body is, because Victor is a real one.
He's a bro.
Alice fights Aleister Crowley here, and they both kill each other? It's very unclear. This is definitely one of those things where you're not entirely sure if a murder happened or not.
Yeah.
Because Alex shoots Aleister Crowley, and she gets stuck by a slow-acting poison, and they both kind of lay there dying, but there's no confirmation that they died whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of happens.
And unlike Shizuku in the waterfall, we're not so sure that these characters are fit to survive everything.
Yes. Shizuku fights Carmilla again, and this time she doesn't lose. It ends in a draw.
I would say Shizuku loses it. She's essentially like, she's totally pinned, but then Carmilla's like, we'll finish this next time, and then leaves Shizuku there. So like, ultimately, Carmilla could have finished her off, but didn't.
True.
The barrier to that, I believe, is some toxic Yuri, but
Lots
fact
of
is,
toxic Yuri.
the Carmilla physically could have killed Shizuku and did not, which is interesting.
Yes, it is. And then they get all of the survivors of the human raid and the werewolf raid to listen to Aya as she explained what happened, and that is Jute, Nora, the leader of the werewolf girls, and Luis were all the same person, sort of. Jute survived and became Nora back in the werewolf village, and Luis would go back and forth pretending to be Luis while Luis was alive. And then Luis let Nora kill her so that Nora could fake her own death. And it turns out that Nora was killing human girls so that she could fake the deaths of werewolf girls so they can escape.
Yeah.
And Suguru and fights her, and then they let her go because they think that what she was doing was noble. And then they decide to go.
I don't know
back.
if she explicitly says that she thinks it's noble,
but she says like, you don't deserve death, which is like, I guess, but also you killed like 5 kids.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is to modernize this. Jute is a juvenile.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they wouldn't try her like an adult. Again, maybe it seems a little weird that they're enacting a bit of transformative justice and some radical trust when also they let the massacre happen a bit of a while ago.
Yeah.
And I think here it doesn't make a lot of sense. I like that they did what they did, but I also think it's fair to say the writing's a little all over the place here.
Yeah, this part's kind of what I would have really enjoyed it if she was also doing something good for the human girls. Like, it is weird that they're like, yeah, murder is okay as long as you're doing it to help people. But, like, she wasn't even murdering bad people. She was murdering children. Which makes me... It's weird. Because, like, on one hand, I get it. But on the other hand, if you wanted to do that... there's ways to do it. And I don't think they did it in a way that is, like... It doesn't make me contemplate anything. It's just like, that's kind of fucked up.
It leaves a nasty taste in your mouth, and I think that is worth something. It also raises questions of, like, are Aya, Suguru, and Shizuku cops? You know, like, are they gonna arrest Yutei or kill her? You know, like, what's their job here? You know, ultimately, their goal is to find Aya's body, and maybe for Suguru to, you know, either take revenge on Moriarty or defeat Jack. What, you know, we're not exactly sure what Suguru's end goal is besides having a fulfilling rest of his life. But you know, it is weird because they're using mystery solving as sort of a vehicle to get around, collect clues for their own stuff, but they don't actually have like any stakes in what's going on here. It's, you know, they as well are kind of bastards to an extent, you know? When, you know, for example, Shizuku is trying to escape, she gets really rough with some of the werewolves, like to the point where we thought she straight up killed one of them until you see him later. You know, like, they don't have like this big moralizing angle to them. They're not paragons, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Which, you know, so I guess that's maybe an important factor here. If you want them to be, then you might be dissatisfied. They're a little more laissez-faire on that sort of front. And sometimes they'll cast judgment and sometimes they won't, but I think most of the time they're in it for their own gain. So as protagonists, they aren't necessarily the moral compass of the show either.
No, they're not good.
I think it's different from something like Spectre, where like in Spectre, Kotoko is also not really a cop, but she usually, you know, ends things off with some kind of moral conclusion, right? Like, you know, now that we have settled this, I feel it's right for this to happen or that to happen. You know, she's not playing a judge in a formal sense, but she is casting sort of expectations for accountability, which, I don't know, maybe makes more sense from a transformative judgment lens, or transformative justice, sorry. Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It's sloppy, but the good stuff is still good.
It's worth questioning, like, do you go to mystery fiction to, like, edify your moral compass, right? Like,
right.
Are you here for protagonists that will do the Batman thing? Or are you not here for that? Are you here more for character interaction and you know, wacky fantasy and
right,
dark humor and
but I can feel bad about the werewolves basically getting genocide.
Yeah,
it's, you know, pretty messed up.
Yeah.
But you're right, that is not what this show is about. I can also feel bad about them letting a person who murdered a bunch of girls go. Totally. But at the same time, everyone kind of sucked in this, and I think that's one of the things that is good about it, is that there's no real person who did the right thing.
Right.
And I don't think they wanted people to feel that way, which is why they had Jute murder children, right? It's like, they didn't want it to be a nice, easy solve. But I don't like it. That being said, I do think the good parts of this arc are really good.
High highs, low lows.
Yeah, but that's where the show ends, right? It ends with them having the knowledge. It ends, in my opinion, to what is going to be the climax, which makes me think that if there is going to be a sequel to this, it's going to be a movie based off of the next book, and that's it. And I feel like the next book is going to be the last book as well.
Do you have any last notes you want to make on characters or their dynamics?
I think I've talked about them enough, right? I like Shizuku being very loyal to Aya, and Aya not abusing that in a way that's problematic. They legitimately seem like good friends. I like Aya and Suguru's shit talking to each other. It's like they both had finally found someone who is just as witty as themselves for the first time.
Yeah.
And so they spend the entire time trying to outwit each other in games of like cleverness, right?
Yeah.
They're both trying to make the funniest joke to each other, or both trying to undermine the other in ways that only they will understand. So it doesn't feel mean, it feels fun. It's kind of like how Kotoko and Kuro, yeah, will try and make make each other uncomfortable. Right?
I could have said any name right there.
I know it's Kuro. I just forgot. But they have their own little banter that is unique to them. I like that Suguru and Shizuku also have that banter, but in a different way. Like when they come into the vampire thing, and Suguru is like, "Hey Shizuku, you forgot my luggage," and she's like, "You have arms, you can carry that." And I love that shit. I think that their little triangle they have going on is great. It's fun.
Yeah. Are you sad that your favorite little reporter didn't show up after the second arc, or
I think that she got what she needed to be. I think that if they want to use her, they'll have to use her later, but I do like her a lot. Her character design is fun. But I kind of like that she is just a reporter, right? She is there to talk about the cage users, and that's it. It's fun. Yeah. It's a good little side character.
Can I say this show is going to make for some kick-ass cosplays?
Oh yeah, 100%. Because I can already see
if anybody watched it.
Yeah, right now on my anime list, it almost has an 8.0.
It's pretty strong. Yeah, the people who did watch it liked it. So
yeah, it has. Let's see some statistics. Everyone's favorite. Yeah. Everybody loves statistics being told by a guy who's not very good at statistics. So it has a 7.94 with about 40,000 users. That's not bad.
Yeah.
That is not bad for a non-manga, non-light novel thing. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. For my anime list's high magnetization towards a 7.0.
Yeah.
To escape that, and hit those upper, flirting at 8.0 range. Pretty nice.
I think it's a solid 9. Maybe an 8, but it is definitely it is a show that I can recommend to people too.
Yeah, for me it was I was same place. I was like, this could be an 8 or a 9 if I were to think that numbers are a good way of rating this, which oftentimes we don't really stick to that as the only metric. But anyways, rewatching through it for notes, I was like, no, yeah, this is a solid 9.
Solid 9.
I think that the blemishes of this show are at least very interesting to talk about. Whether it's the production stuff or it's the writing, it's not boring, which is great for us and our tastes. And back on the whole character design front, my goodness, there's just a lot of variety, and just really slick designs. I feel like practically everyone has something iconic going on. There's fun details, in the first episode, Shizuku's dressed up in Japanese robes, and then when they start traveling through Europe, she's more in a European-made outfit. The when they get to go out of bounds on stuff like, hey, we get to invent our own Sherlock Holmes, we get to invent our own, you know, iterations of these characters. I think they're standouts. Some of them are a little weaker than others. Victor is, not amazing in terms of aesthetics, or it's like, okay, yeah, that's passable. It's not particularly interesting, but he's a fun character. And so that balances really well. They've got a bit of the everyone's sexy effect going on with, say, like the whole second case. When you've got Lupin, you've got the Phantom, you've got Holmes, and a decent chunk of the Banquet. All the Royce agents are slick as hell. And, they have some of the more complicated costuming, but my god, like, if someone were to cosplay that, so impressive. It's the kind of thing where someone looks at it and goes, what is that from? Like, what is this character from? Like, the head turner kind of stuff. And these are costumes as well that, we have people of color in the cast. It's, always a welcome fare from us. Especially in these past couple years, we've been watching shows that we really like that also feature, characters of color done really well. And so this is another one of those to pin up on the billboard.
Can I talk about some drop in quality in the last couple episodes? I have some theories too. So the last few episodes, there are some really bad shit that happens in terms of quality animation. We're talking like legitimate PowerPoint transition zoom-ins, right? Where it is zooming in a picture and then another picture and then another picture. We're talking about completely off-model characters climbing up mountains that are tiny, but compared to the trees around them, they're massive. And we're talking, green screen halos. We're talking just some really awkward stuff. And I think because of how late that last book came out, I bet you that they were like, hey, you're going to animate the last book, which isn't out yet. Because this came out in what? August? September?
Mm-hmm.
The final book came out in July. So that would leave them with only a couple months to really nail it down. Yeah. And I think that really fucked up production schedules.
That's a fair theory. Yeah. It's clear that, like, the final episodes are a lot more Spartan. They're trying some things experimentally that don't really pan out. They try to do this effect where a character in the foreground is sort of blurred with depth of field, but they're only blurring sort of like one edge of the face, and since it's a cartoon and they're trying to apply that blur to 2D imaging, it really doesn't exactly, like, it doesn't look filmic, right? Wow, that sounded pretentious. But what I mean to say is, like, the camera and how it functions will naturally sort of produce that effect. In attempting to mimic it in 2D, it just doesn't look right. And that's even one of the things that they're trying to do that's interesting. In general, there aren't that many visual flares that they're trying. And as you mentioned, there's just some transitions, especially in like the last few episodes, that are just like, it's like, all right, we're going to take the entire cell of this, this part of the show. We're just going to zoom it in the center of the screen, until it's wide enough to fit all the corners. And then we're going to do that again for the next scene. It's like, it is a PowerPoint transition, which, no, that doesn't mean, like, don't go and proliferate that as, did you know that they animated those last scenes in PowerPoint? That's not what I mean. It means that, it's a simple effect, and it's not used in a way that communicates visually what is being performed or thought by the characters. It just kind of feels like they're like, shit, we've got to make this a little more interesting, but we don't have anything cool planned like we had before, so we're gonna resort to some very primitive tricks of moving from one frame to another. In some ways, I think it would have been better if they just left it as flat shots, cut from one to the next and move on. It still would have been noticeably, less active and less creative than the previous arcs, but yeah, yeah, I think I've said enough, but yeah. Any last thoughts on that?
No, that's kind of how I felt. Let's talk about your lesbian crush.
So if you're not a frequent viewer of Familiar Territory,
we love the gays.
Yeah, we do. Look, so I guess to give the Familiar Territory rewind, I'm someone that personally, I do love me some good Yuri of Absence. I have a respect for it. I watched Noir. I've been there. I know what that's all about. I will watch Pretty Cure and see two characters brush shoulders, and sincerely, I'll be like, what do they mean by that? I'm also someone who's greedy for explicit lesbian representation and Yuri in anime. It's not that it's nowhere, right? But I find sometimes that I'm saddened by, times when the volleyball is set up into the air and they don't take the spike. Can I blame them? I don't know. Especially when, take something like Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch from Mercury. That's a Gundam show with some romantic underlining elements for plot and thematic reasons. I can't blame them if they needed to sideline the romance for the dozens of other things they're trying to accomplish in that show, right? And we'll have the fanfiction community to contribute to that in place of it, and etc. But holy shit, this show came out of nowhere with that. This is not a romantic show. The most heterosexual thing that we get, aside from characters being married to each other, is Sugaru and Aya passionlessly swapping spit, right? Maybe the most romantic inclination we can get out of that is some awkward sort of sounds that they'll make. But this is not a romance-driven show, right? It's not even anyone's motive in any of these cases. So for this, to dedicate an extreme amount of time to characterizing Shizuku as a lesbian and put her through toxic lesbian trials.
The repressed lesbian girls love gauntlet.
My god! Holy shit. Aosaki-san delivered. Okay? I can't even complain anymore, I don't think. In a show where I could only dream of this sort of thing happening, they put full force into Shizuku as a lesbian icon, and fleshing her out as it as well. Yeah, I'm just literally not allowed to complain anymore. I got this in a place where I never would have expected it. We have a homoerotic roller coaster that doesn't just happen in one place in the story. That it's weaved through. I'm gonna run by a lightning round of these moments because it blows my fucking mind. Okay, and then we can just move on. So first, episode 1, Suguru and Aya make out for the first time, so that he can use her saliva for extending his life. Blink and you might miss it, but Shizuku bites her lip. She flinches. I noticed it, and I was like, "Ooh, that's something." And I was pretty certain that they weren't going to carry it anywhere. But hey, we have this sudden tiny injection of character into Shizuku, that she's someone that feels paternal and or romantic to Aya, right? And just cool. Okay, now I have something that's like running in the background of my head whenever they're interacting. It's some unspoken tension that we can carry forward. Congrats. This is already a nice little bonus for me in this show. But then it keeps going, because in episode 7, Carmilla shows up and gets to have a one-on-one fight with Shizuku. And her whole thing is that her venom is an aphrodisiac. It makes the victim numb and feverish, and they sort of cosmetically and aesthetically flavor that as like a sexual heat. They win this fight, literally turn on like banging music. It's like, slow, sensual music with feminine vocalization. This doesn't happen elsewhere in the show, right? And then during the fight, Carmilla ends up shredding some of Shizuku's clothes. She is sexually caressing her, which obviously is it's like harassment, right? Don't worry, I'm not gonna like oh, it's cool and fun because lesbians, she's still a villain here. But Shizuku's resisting that. She doesn't return Carmilla's compliments. She says that she's used to someone with far more experience, which again is like, oh my god, what? I don't know if she's talking about Aya platonically in the way that they, interact with each other. I don't know if she's referring to Aya romantically, and if so, if that's a one-sided thing, or not. I don't know if they have a history like that, and we're not going to get an explanation of it. I don't know if she's had a lover before, but in any case, it's kind of official. Shizuku is someone who likes women, but not Carmilla, because Carmilla's, messed up vampire. And so that happens, right? They fight some more. Shizuku survives. She returns to the group. Aya's glad to see her. Shizuku is happy to be back with Aya. And then Suguru gives her a look and just goes, And then she gets kind of flustered by that. But I don't take that as Suguru being pervy. I take that as Suguru being an ally.
Yes.
Maybe I'm misreading that, but it is kind of funny.
It's also kind of in their dynamic for him to make her in a position that's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. He's pushing her buttons.
Yeah, I don't think Suguru is being perverted. I think he's like, I forgot to pack your underwear. Haha, get fucked.
Yeah.
It's more. Yeah. I think there is a little bit in their dynamic where he will push her buttons to make her flustered.
Yeah. But she's clearly kind of it's not an issue when she's being perceived by Aya, right? It is an issue when she's being perceived by other people who she wants to seem composed with. It's another insight into her and her relationships, right? Episode 10, Shizuku does the big save. She entrusts Aya with Suguru and goes over the waterfall. In episode 11, she wakes up, as you mentioned before, in an actual werewolf cuddle pile, in which one of those werewolf women, Kaya, is naked, and Shizuku is also naked. And Kaya's just hugging up on her. They don't really play this up romantically a great deal, but I will say that when she's talking with them later, there's these little sprinklings of something. I'll say that when Shizuku's talking with Kaya after waking up, she's not making eye contact. It's a little, by depth, it's a little difficult to tell if she's just averting her eyes or if she's kind of checking her out. But anyways, I'm getting a little too lost in the weeds here. When she makes tea for everybody who rescued her, Kaya's watching her lovingly, and then when she's all done, picks out the ingredients that Shizuku used by smell, which breaks Shizuku a little bit. She like stutters for once when she's confirming that Kaya got all the ingredients right. And then of course they try to help her escape later. She gets caught, imprisoned, so on and so forth. Aya and Suguru go to break her out, and they bring her clothes or a change of clothes. Suguru fucked up and forgot her underwear, which is important for later. The banquet shows up, and Carmilla's here again. It's time for round 2. She first targets a bunch of the werewolf women, and uses her venom on them, and so they're all kind of, in that heat state when Shizuku finds them. What?
Not a fan of the way you phrased
they're seduced.
that.
They're seduced.
That's better.
Once again, like, sprawled out cuddle pile sort of situation. I should mention too that Aya is like, hey, go save Kaya. And she sends Shizuku off to do this. Which is, again, a sign that they trust each other and that Aya's, looking out for Shizuku and her bonds. It's not just about, like, the three of them solving the case. They do have personal interests that they're attending to. It's a nice little detail. Anyways, while they're, while Shizuku is finding this, this does somewhat lend credence to the fact that Shizuku might not be attracted to Carmilla in the slightest. It might just be the aphrodisiac sort of has that, like, entrancing effect towards her, particularly with the underlying fantastical elements of her being a vampire. But anyways, when they do get back to fighting, it does seem that, Carmilla has a particular interest in Shizuku, even if it's not returned. I forgot to mention, but Shizuku gives Aya's cage a hug before she goes off to check on Kaya and the others. So, the rematch. They're fighting. Carmilla mentions, so this is something I didn't really pay attention to the first time, but she mentions that a body that has to fight her venom will sort of build a resistance to it, which raises the question of when they're having these toxic Yuri fights, literally toxic Yuri fights, will there become a point where Shizuku is no longer, victim to the aphrodisiac, and what will that reveal of her feelings to Carmilla? My theory is that ultimately Carmilla ends up leaving her alive at the end of this, because Carmilla's kind of trying to figure out how Shizuku feels about her in return. I know that's kind of like a batshit theory, but whatever. I'm already being cringe about this, so I just have to lay it all out. But during the fight, Shizuku does a roundhouse kick to deflect Carmilla, and in the process accidentally flashes her, because Jesus Christ, this is the entire horny concentration to this show. And it's just, it's a weird bit of sexual comedy interlaced into this otherwise important, serious fight. Like, again, they make a little visual comedy bit out of this, and it doesn't feel weird to me. I don't know if it feels weird to other people, but for some reason it works. Anyways, Carmilla gets the upper hand, Shizuku gets slashed across the thigh, and then in a haze, she starts to dream that the other poisoned women are kind of grabbing up on her and holding her in place. So it's like, okay, what does that imply? And ultimately Carmilla has Shizuku dead to rights right there, right? Like, she is effectively lost, and she's totally entranced in the aphrodisiac. But Carmilla instead leaves with the hanging question of whether she really didn't enjoy her advances. So, yeah. Shizuku was left alive, and I feel alive too. Such just brazen, toxic Yuri in the middle of a mystery show, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is Monster Mash anime with a significant amount of showtime spent on lesbian interaction in an unhealthy fashion. I'm fucking mystified by it. It's amazing. I feel like I have no choice but to just be, like, positively appalled by how this is such a major part of this property. Like, this is more Yuri than some Yuri that I've read and watched.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's all good.
I got it all out of my system.
You did it.
The aphrodisiac has exited my body.
Yes, it did. You have talked about Toxic Yuri for essentially 12
More than
minutes
10 minutes,
straight.
yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty long. Let's talk about themes.
All right.
Theme number 1. People are different, and you can't blame them for murders because they're different.
Hey, I'm just a different guy. You wouldn't arrest a different guy, would you?
Yeah,
But-
it's like there's a lot of racism parallels, especially like the werewolf human village, right?
And of course, we have the intersections of that with, ableism of Louise's parents. The matriarchal pressures of the werewolf tribe. The marginalization feels like a big factor of this, right? Like, if Scooby-Doo taught us that the real monsters are humans, then Undead Girl Murder Farce teaches us that the real monsters are white people who catalyze dissent, distrust, acts of violence, and undue suffering in marginalized populations. And although one may be quick to judge marginalized people for acting outside of the status quo, it's critical to examine how the dominating white culture's systemic and interpersonal oppression serves as the root of cause to be dealt with.
Yep, you did it. You said the thing.
I did. I wrote all that down before this. I could.
I know, I can tell because you don't speak that smoothly normally.
Okay, but yeah, I at this point in time, I am generally in favor of how this show handles the topics of race allegory and marginalization. A lot of this is about, racial contention. I mean, case 1 and 3 are not about humans, conducting acts of prejudice. It's about the responses to that. And it's not that prejudice didn't happen before. In fact, prejudice is the, major instigator for these cases. But they're messy, right? I feel like this show, and of course the novel, which we haven't read, but, implying, that it's trusting you as a reader or viewer, to understand that the reason why these cases are interesting is because they have precedent, right? They have factors that came before, that when, Raul kills his mother, it's not just, interesting on the facet of, wow, this anime character's crazy. It is about, we're seeing an end result of the pressure cooker of oppression. I like that it takes us there, It doesn't feel like it's talking down to you. It's not a lot of happy endings, but at the very least, it gives me lots to think about as a result, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I get to say this from a privileged position. I don't think that it treats marginalized people as kind of like the easy entertainment either, of just like, it doesn't feel like they're being propped up as a storytelling device to be like, look, trauma isn't that interesting, right? It does feel like they're saying some things.
Yes.
And I totally agree that it's not without, criticism. Like, it's worth going into the show with an active, ready mind of, hey, what is this going to mean to me when I walk out of it? And, what is the author's intentions? What history are they leaning on? what messages maybe unconsciously are being sent by this. There's a lot to examine. But I think it's a good one to examine, for sure. I do think that, like, from the Royce Advisory Security Department agents being, like, they're international, it's sort of cosmopolitan in its approach, but the whole point is, protecting property. I feel like there's a case where colonialism is kind of the undercurring problem, right? I feel like there's meat there to chew on. I think it's interesting that, like, Tsugaru is racialized for his monster half in the same way that a lot of times, like, when someone is half white American, you don't say that part of it, you just say half whatever is not the white part, right? I feel like there are contemporary allegories that can apply here. And, whether or not this is, like, the right media to be someone's first or pinnacle example of, like, racialized fantasy topics, I don't know. Really kind of depends on where you're at. But I at least think it's a good. I think there's plenty of value it brings to the table. I'll say that, and I hope that people really dig into this show. I would love to see some really deep analyses of it. Okay, I think I've said all I need to say on that. Hypotheticals time?
Yeah.
Okay. We haven't talked about Inspector enough.
What?
So let's do that now. It being another novel series centered on supernatural mysteries, who empathize with non-human entities and feature a cunning female detective and her invincible male partner. Albeit Inspector does not have a Shizuku counterpart. Let's make some match for funsies. Which Undead Girl Murder Farce case would be the most fun for Kotoko and Kuro to take on? These don't have to follow the same beats, by the way, like, because Kotoko and Kuro would solve the mystery differently. So, again, yeah, what's the most fun case from this show they would take on?
I think the Sherlock episode with Kotoko and Kuro would be insane. I think Kuro being just, like, absolutely dismal in the middle of London in the 1900s. And then, like, the thing is that, like, Suguru is unkillable because his prowess, right? Like, he is not immortal, right? Yeah. Kuro will just die in front of people and then get back up and keep fighting. I would love to see, like, Jack the Ripper ripping him apart and him just, like, reforming and being just, like, a little bit upset about it.
Yeah.
I would also love, like, because the realization that Aya is just a head in the cage is always good, but the realization that Kuro is immortal involves watching a guy die.
Yeah.
I think it would be fucking awesome.
A very normal guy, too.
Yeah, just like the most normal guy. The white bread of man. The Honda Civic of dudes.
Yeah, I think the vampire case might be fun, in the sense that Kotoko has the ability to get under people's skin. I think she would crack that case very differently from Shizuku.
Kotoko's kind of has the Harry Dubois thing from Disco Elysium, where she gets people to talk, right? She is not nearly as, she lies. Mm-hmm. All she does is lie until the lie gets people to say something. Yeah. I think less people would die.
Yeah, I would love, like, just the fact that the vampire case is like, here's a bunch of people who all emotionally seem like they're ready to snap. I think Kotoko I would like to see what the writers of Inspector kind of come up with in that scenario, right? It's a little like the final case of season 2, but with a lot more, like, immediacy, and frankly, maybe like easier to manipulate participants. So yes. Now let's flip this around. If we were to bring Suguru, Aya, and Shizuku into Inspector, what case would they have the most fun solving? We have twice as many or more cases to pick from.
Yeah, but I mean, but the thing is, season 1 is almost entirely
the Steel Lady Nanase case. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that they would like the what's the first case in season 2?
Mm-hmm. The apartment complex that has the
no
the Yukiona case.
Yeah, I think they would love that because it's romantic, and I think Suguru would find it fun to kind of like do his whole theater thing with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Aya would find it cute as well. I think it would be like kind of a quaint thing for her.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to see Aya trying to solve a case that she can't go to the crime scene on. The final case of Inspector season 2, which has happened in the past. Since she wouldn't be able to, go and actually, get any forensics, she would only be able to talk with people, and use witness accounts. I'm interested to see how she would play that, since she's a little more straight-laced in working with people than Kotoko is. Whereas Kotoko is, like, as you mentioned, she will lie in order to get people to, admit things they perhaps did not want to admit.
Yeah.
What's your hypothetical, Grant?
So, a blunder has happened. Okay. Now, Aya and Kotoko and Suguru and Kuro are both... They have separated. So you have Kotoko and Aya working together, and Suguru and Kuro working together.
Oh my god.
They have to solve a case completely new. Who solves it first?
Oh, Jesus. This is tricky. I do think that Aya and Kotoko would solve it first, but I'll say this: it's a fascinating situation because I feel like Kotoko not being with Kuro and being with someone else who would definitely think, like Aya would think, I'm smarter than this girl,
Yes.
And so I think that they would get in each other's way. I think Kotoko would deliberately kind of screw with the situation. Because, I mean, she already does that, right? She already uses deceit in order to, work out a case and illuminate all the details. And so I think it'd be interesting to see them kind of foiling each other. As for Suguru and Kuro,
by the way, they would bro out so hard.
They would. I feel like they would take time off of the case to
just have a drink.
Yeah, they just go and grab they go get crepes.
Yeah.
And talk about the case for a while, and then and Suguru would do a little Rakugo act with it, where instead of a fan as a prop, he's using the crepe.
Yes.
We
know that Kuro has fun without Kotoko.
Yeah.
The pictures of him working and doing other things, and he's smiling. He would have a great time.
Yeah. I do think eventually he would be like, damn, I miss my girlfriend. And then at that point, hey, let's hurry it up. And then they might start taking it more seriously. So I think that they would be the slower to solve the case.
But they would have way more they would have way less drama.
Yeah.
All right.
We're done.
Wow. I can't believe it. This is a long episode.
It is.
It's a long episode. Thank you so very much for joining us to listen to us talk about Undead Girl Murder Farce. If you'd like to listen to us talk about other anime shows, you can check out our other videos. We just did Yuki Yuna, the Great Monkai chapter, which we did not like. And what is our next show we're going to review, Brantley?
Do I have to say it?
Yeah, baby, say it.
It's probably going to be Reign of the Seven Spellblades.
Reign of the Seven Spellblades! Dude, it's so good.
Why did it get 15 episodes?
I think I'm going to have to take my time. I might write like a whole-on script for that show because I want to get everything down.
Do it.
Because I don't want to fucking journey to Elena shit where people come on and they're like, and they push up their glasses like I just did, pushed up my own glasses. And they're like, well, actually, you missed the integral parts of this episode. Nah, fuck, man, I didn't. I know what's happening. It's not that deep. You can check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to us. Let us know what you think about us. Did you like Undead Girl Murder Farce? Did you hate it? Do you think that we're a bunch of pretentious assholes? Put it in the comments. I'll respond to it. You can also follow us on twitch.tv/familiar territory, where we play video games like Ghost Trick and other games. But right now, Ghost Trick. Or you don't need to do any of that, because we are not your dads.